Turn the sound off.
He's doing a feedback, but he's going to get rid of that.
This is going to be an interesting show.
And I told him not to turn it on.
I know, right? I did too.
All right.
Oh, technology.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yes and no. So I've got about 500 milliliter bottles. And that is the way.
Okay, we are now streaming live over on Facebook, and let's see where we're at. Few people joining us already, so let's see here. Oh, looks like your dad's on too, Matt.
Perfect. We had a little echo there for a minute. I had to explain how that works.
Right on. All right, we'll get going here in just a minute. Yeah, that's your work over there, Derby. You guys, looks good. So. All right, a few people joining us again. I see one of our regular attendees or audience members, David Rappaport. Thank you for coming on again. Paul Maynard there. I see Scott Oberg also joining us again. So a few familiar names in the audience. And I think we're over on Facebook side of things. We're starting to get many people joining us as well. So we'll give it another minute before we kick it off.
I'll just keep drinking this rosé then.
That's pretty good, huh? Well done, Sean.
Yes, that was the first wine that I made for Derby that's been released.
Have you made the rosé yet for this year?
2020? No.
Is it still haven't taken the grapes in yet?
No, we're picking some Pinot Noir tonight out of the coast.
Oh, okay.
Those grapes that I get in.
Nice.
You
We've been picking for like 2-3 weeks, little things here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You guys been kind of at it for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a few weeks. We've been going at it. Mostly Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, depending on the ranches out in the valley a lot, and Santa Barbara County.
Nice.
Some Paso stuff too.
You guys have whites planted at Pomar Junction as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we picked our Viognier actually this past week. So yeah, that was ready. The Grenache Blanc is a little further behind. It's always later, so we're still waiting on that.
I like that one. When I went into your guys' tasting room, when I first came to Paso, I bought a couple bottles of that wine. It's quite nice.
Yeah.
It's just fun, nice wine. They retain acidity really well. Good.
Yeah. It's been a good wine for us for sure. Yeah.
All right, you guys, let's kick it off. We got many people that were able to join us over on Facebook, and so we've got a few people here on Zoom as well. So we're going to kick it off. So once again, thank you for joining us. I'm Chris Toronto with the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. This is our Thursday Zoom hangout. I'm hanging out today with a couple of experts on planting vineyards. That's going to be our topic today, is all about planting a vineyard and what really goes into it, right? So my guests today are Matt Merrill from Mesa Vineyard Management, but also with Pomar Junction Winery. And then we had a little technical glitch earlier, and so Steve is joining Sean in the same screen instead of a separate screen like we normally do. But they're both with Derby Wine Estates. Sean Geoghegan, did I pronounce that correctly?
Geoghegan.
And Steve Vierra with Derby Wine Estates, but also has a another business that he'll talk a little bit about. But Matt, let's start with you. A quick who you are and what you do and a little bit about your brand.
Yeah, Matt Merrill. I help with Mesa Vineyard Management. It's my family's vineyard management company. So we manage vineyards from San Ynez Valley up through Santa Maria Valley, Edna Valley, Paso Robles, up Monterey County for Hana Estates, and even some vineyards up in Oregon. And so we do a bunch of vineyards in the Central Coast, primarily a little bit in Oregon. And then also our family owns Colmar Junction Vineyard and Winery, where we make some of our own wines from grapes that we own or manage, and use Jim Shoemate as our winemaker. He's a professor at Cal Poly, and he's helping with the Wine a Bit program there. And we just kind of make wines to show off what we can do with our vineyard management, and it kind of all works together. Although, like the guys can tell you probably from Derby, the vineyard side is completely different than the sales side and the wine side. So it's definitely an interesting mix.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
And then introduce Sean. Sean with winemaker over at Derby Wine Estates. A little bit about yourself, Sean, and the brand.
Yeah, my name is Sean Geoghegan. I'm the winemaker here at Derby. I started on in April of 2019, so I vinified the 2019 vintage here at Derby. Before that, I was working for Matt Merrill and his family at Mesa Vineyard Management for a year. I was doing viticulturalist work, so a lot of the stuff I did with Mesa was soil studies, plant suitability studies, a lot of redevelopment, fruit stock choices, clonal choices, those kind of things. So it all kind of works out. Our winery, Derby Wine Estates, we have 3 estate vineyards. Laura's Vineyard, which is located on 46 East, coming into Paso from the east. The Derby Vineyard, located just off 46 West, just north of 46 West as you come out of Templeton there. And then the Derby Shire Vineyard, which is a really unique site, about a mile from the Pacific Ocean, off Highway 1 in San Simeon. So our winery is the old Almond building, the old Almond Growers Cooperative building in downtown Paso that was renovated and finished in 2014, and it's now used as our production facility.
Cool, thanks. And then Steve, I'll tell everybody the impetus of this program today was actually kind of based on a conversation I had with Steve recently about planting vineyards, and it gave me the idea of wanting to do a show like this. So Steve, introduce yourself. I think we heard a little bit about Derby Wine Estates, but in which you work for, but then also you do some other stuff on the side.
Yeah, again, Steve Vierra with Derby Wine Estates. I am Director of Vineyard Operations for Derby, and I manage all 3 of their vineyards. So it's that's my full-time, my priority job. But I'm also a certified professional soil scientist. Prior to coming, I came on with Derby in 2011, basically January of 2011. But prior to that, I was with Vineyard Professional Services for about 12 years as a vineyard manager, but also a soil scientist. And so during that time, I had the great opportunity to really look at a lot of just virgin land properties and do a lot of vineyard development and design. And so I do a little bit of that. Since I've done that for so long, I've kind of created a name for myself. So I do a little bit of that on the side, just as a consulting away from Derby, just really in the realms of land use management and as it pertains to vineyard and vineyard design.
Yeah, with 3 vineyards that you're managing for Derby, that's got to be a full-time job, because I've seen and visited I think all 3 properties, and they're not small.
No, so between the 3 ranches, there's almost 450 acres, not quite, but they're all very, very different, and they all go through very different programs, and they grow, I think the number is 26 varieties over the 3 sites. And Laura's is our more commercial vineyard, if you will, more adapt to mechanization and kind of more of your, I'd say a lot of your value-driven wines and fruit. And then Derby West is a kind of a hodgepodge, a plethora really of Rhone Spanish and Bordeaux varieties. And then of course you go all the way to the coast, which is, you know, so we're farming over really 3 different very regions, region 1 to a hot, warm region. And over there we've got primarily Pinot, Pinot Gris, cool climate varieties, Chardonnay. So yeah, it's really fun and it keeps me busy. Yep.
Yeah, I bet it does. So we're talking about planting a brand new vineyard. So basically taking raw land and putting a vineyard in. And I know that for so many people, that sounds like such a nice, maybe retirement or something, like, oh, I can retire and watch my vineyard grow or whatever. And in previous conversations, we've all kind of had a good laugh about that. But I want to talk about what really goes into plotting and planning out a vineyard, because I mean, it's not like just planting some tomatoes in your backyard. There's a lot of science and a lot of hard work that goes into it. What's the very first thing that you do though? What straight up, and I'll start with you, Steve. What do you do first?
Yeah, really the first thing is just a general inventory of the property. You know, what is the property, and then hone in really on what is potentially plantable. And there can be a lot that goes into what is potentially plantable, but a lot of it is just common sense. You know, is it safe to farm? Is it accessible? Is it covered in trees? You know, is it all rocks? What are the things that would potentially exclude part of the property from being plantable? And once you kind of get an idea of what's plantable, from there, that's when you start digging deeper and basically getting an inventory of all the environmental factors that it has: the soil, the water resources, the climate, the topography. And then at that point, I don't know if you want me to keep going, or, I mean, then it's working with what are the potentials of the property. But also just as importantly is what are the goals for the owners. It is definitely a team effort. What is the goals for the owner, the winemaker, the wine sales, the whole thing, and what's possible for the property, and then taking it from there, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a lot of pictures to share that Steve has sent over my way, as well as Matt. You sent me a few things as well, and so I'll be getting to a screen share here in just a minute. But that's interesting, though, that the goals. So I want to grow some really great Cabernet, and I have this particular piece of property, and you're saying that if you go and you're assessing it and you're looking at it, what if Cab is the wrong fruit? Or how do you know that? How do you know if Cab is the right fruit or the wrong fruit? Or you know, I
think I can take that one. Well,
yeah.
I mean, in the New World, we kind of have this very wild west where we can plant 26 different varieties and you kind of see what works. In the Old World, in France, they've had thousands of years and generations to figure out exactly which grapes, and they've bred their grapes to match their climate. For here, we don't really have the time to do that. If you plant a vineyard, a well-planted vineyard will last you most of your career. A lot of vineyard managers won't even get the opportunity to do a lot of planting in their careers. So for us, you really kind of have, there's been work done by UC Davis where they map out what they call degree days, and that gives you an idea of how much heat you have to ripen a certain grape, and they've broke those down into region 1, the coolest, or region 5, which is the warmest. And that gives you an idea. And then, people understand, well, Cabernet, that's going to be a great region 2, region 3, into region 4 grape. But if you're region 5, you don't really want to plant Cabernet. It's going to be just too hot. If you're region 1, it's going to be too cold.
Might not ripen.
But in reality, most people aren't planting sites that are so unique that there aren't other grapes around. So you can really get an idea of what exists there. So going in saying, I want to plant grape Cab, you would have to put the Cab and then buy the land. If you have a piece of land, you have to kind of tell yourself, okay, what's going to be the most suitable grape variety for this particular terroir?
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, the little bit of the experience. I mean, something that kind of pops in my head was like Tablas Creek, their experience in France. They kind of scoured over the U.S. and California and zeroed in on where they planted their vineyard over in Paso. So they noticed that there was a lot of similarities with the soils, with the climate, and kind of laid their stake to that area. And I think a lot of experience from us vineyard guys are knowing where certain fruit was grown and what the quality turned out like, and what the pitfalls are of certain areas versus other areas, and all that type of stuff. So a lot of it goes into the soil analysis and all that type of stuff, making sure the soils are correct, you got enough water or enough rainfall if you're going to do dry farming. There's just a lot of those aspects that you got to figure out. And well, the other aspect you got to figure out is what you have and you're comfortable with spending, because you can't really go cheap on anything. You got to do it right, or it's not gonna turn out very well at all. So you got to go all in or nothing at all. Basically, you got to make that decision.
100%.
And so I know you guys end up, when you're assessing the land, you're digging soil pits like this one in particular. And I think I have another one here for you. What are you looking for? So when you're starting this process, what types of things are you analyzing, and what are you doing with that information?
So yeah, you're taking an inventory of what type of soils you have and where they are throughout the property. But when you're looking at each individual soil pit, you're looking at both the physical characteristics of the soil, whether the soil texture, sand, silt, and clay, how much are where the different horizons are, potentially how deep that is, and then you're also looking at the soil chemistry. And so you're really looking at the growing potential of each soil and how that's going to affect ultimately wine grape quality, but vine growth. And so you can see this soil here. This is really only has about 8 inches of topsoil, and below that it's kind of your high free lime calcareous material that we've got real common in the Central Coast. And so that soil is going to be very different, and how you design the vineyard around that soil versus one that has maybe 2 or 3 feet of that black material up top.
And is it at this point in time too that you start to consider maybe different root stocks or anything like that? Because
yeah, so the goal is to kind of take all the information from the soil, the physical and chemical aspect of it, and see which rootstocks will work best for that soil. And so I'm choosing rootstocks with the overall long-term goal that it's going to be a self-sufficient vine, that it's going to grow an adequate 3 or 4 foot shoot, and it's going to be able to adequately have a leaf cover and then ripen the fruit for the end product. And so different soils require different rootstocks, or more specifically, how you treat those soils. You're just always looking for that balanced vine. You've got to play around with the soil type and the rainfall and everything to come up with the right rootstock for that specific soil, really.
yeah. And
So are we seeing here the like where it's ripped and then the actual amendments are put right in line right there? Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah. One of the practices we're doing, especially when you have a root limiting layer like a heavy clay pan or a lime cemented layer, we're ripping with the wing tines on the row, and then we're leaving a delve, if you will. And then at that point, we'll spread whatever amendments we may need to improve that soil, or the soil may be lacking in that delve, and then coming back again with the ripper and incorporating it to depth. There's the ripper there, and then and making a mound. And so that's there's an example of a root limiting layer. So you only have that at 2 feet, but if you rip the 4, now you have 4 feet of rooting area versus 2. And so that's a root limiting layer. So
when you plant, are you planting basically like along where that ripper goes, or what actually?
That is, yeah. So that is GPS guided. That is the row. So it's 100% effective where exactly we want it. Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
So you're giving the vineyard the best chance to get off to a good start, and that ultimately helps with the life of the vineyard and the quality of the vineyard. So yeah, that's something that has really helped with newer vineyards being planted more recently.
I think it goes back to what Matt was saying about doing it right the first time. When a grapevine struggles, they almost never recover. Like when you have a well-planted vineyard, well-chosen rootstock, a well-amended and prepared soil, the vine should really just take off like gangbusters. And the ones that don't usually end up getting replanted. It's very rare that a vineyard will struggle in its first year or two and then really just come back and be a long-lived and high-quality vineyard.
I think the point that we're all kind of driving home essentially is, again, you got to do your due diligence from the very beginning and throw the book at it and no expenses spared from the beginning. Because if that's not done, ultimately those deficiencies over the 20 plus year life of the vineyard, you're going to be battling and may have to throw more resources at it, and it's not a self-sustainable vine. So you end up with an inferior product that ends up costing you money to farm too. So it's worth it with the money up front.
Yep.
Steve, you sent me this picture, by the way, and I have no idea.
Yeah. So there's a lot of just small things that, again, so that is a what we call a model or a redoxamorphic feature in soil science, and that's an indication of like a seasonal high water table. So in the spring, essentially, a portion of that soil is underwater. However, though you looked at that soil pit in the fall, the water has resided, but it's left that behind. So that's, again, indications of, is this thing, will these roots be underwater? It looks great now, but, maybe in the spring, it's not so great. So,
Yeah.
Right. And does that means you could possibly, either abandon that area or figure out a way that you can drain it out so that it doesn't affect the vineyard long term? Yeah, you just got to make sure you can get the water out, and then it may be fine. Yeah. Oh yeah. So this is kind of an overhead aerial view of what we use on some of our vineyards. It's called Vine View. It shows you an exact picture and then kind of puts a point to each vine of how much water stress it's under. And you can see where it's usually bluer, greener. That's where it's less stressed, has more water flowing through the leaf, through the tips. And then where it starts to turn brown and then even white, those might be missing vines. So you can see on the right-hand side, this particular vineyard, Sauvignon Blanc, that is pretty uniform and looks pretty good. This is actually, I think, August 22nd, they took this picture. But on the left, you can see kind of a hillside that falls off, and there's some really beautiful oak trees there, but the oak trees are affecting the vines around it, and they are, it looks like, they're stealing the water from the vines. So there's different ways to mitigate it, as far as maybe adding an extra emitter in there, or sometimes you put an oak tree barriers, but eventually it seems like the oak tree always finds a way around those. So it's one of those things, if you're putting in a small vineyard and all you have is that little block and that little corner on the left, you're just going to be fighting with those oak trees the whole time, and it may not be something that really produces much of a crop at all. Whatever is there, birds will probably come and pick out and eat if you can't get it bird netted, but it can show you the amount of variability there. And depending on your size of vineyard, if you have a real small, like 5-acre piece and you have a lot of trees like that, then you may not get much production at all. But if it's a 5 acres out of 100 acres or plus, then it doesn't make a huge difference, but it can show you how, this is one of the tools we use to show people who are managing for or owners what's happening in the vineyard. So yeah, that next one was kind of an overall of the whole ranch, and then this one's a little bit more zoomed in into the corner there. Yeah.
Hey, so when let me go back to this one. So you have a hillside, right? I mean, let's talk a little bit about aspect. I mean, is there a certain, west facing or south facing or whatever types of things that are better than others? And then when you end up plotting that vineyard out, like, if you're ripping it or whatever, I mean, are you going up and down? Are you side to side? I mean, what goes into some of those choices?
Well, for us, there's a lot of different variabilities. Typically, one of them is safety for the workers, and being able to drive the tractor up and down is safer than side slope and all that. And then the other thing is the aspects. Typically, southwest facing slopes produce the higher quality than other slopes, just north facing or northeast facing, just because of the way that the aspects there with the sun being able to ripen the fruit. But on the other hand, sometimes in a hotter region, sometimes those other aspects add a different complexity to the fruit. So it's not totally negative all the time, but it is preferred typically to be south and southwesterly facing than other directions.
Yeah. Any input from you guys over at Derby?
Yeah, I mean, aspect for me is just, you've got north, south, east, and west, and they're all very different. And again, in designing the vineyard, maybe those cooler slopes, you're looking for varieties that ripen earlier, or a lot of times we'll put whites on the north facing slopes. So yeah, they can be used to your advantage. They're not as warm, again, and as easy to ripen things, but a lot of times we'll put varieties specifically on those east and north slopes that are a good match for those. That can increase the quality as well.
Yeah. Does prevailing wind at all come into play as well when it comes to that?
Big time. Yeah, I mean, at Derbyshire, with it, the wind can be, yes. Yeah, at Derbyshire, we can talk about it when we go over the wines, but it's right off the coast, and the wind is a significant issue there, challenge. So yeah, playing into the wind and knowing what your prevailing winds are and when those are during the time period of the life of the vine are extremely important. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about what we're drinking today. And here, let me actually go right back to where I was a second ago, because I actually have, whoops, let's go that way.
Well, that looks nice too.
There we go. So we have a rosé, a 19 rosé from Derby, which I don't know, Sean, if you want to talk a little bit about what's in this wine, because that's where we're at right now and what we're tasting.
Sure. So this is a rosé from the Derby Vineyard. It's all Rhone varieties, red Rhone varieties. Cinsault, Counoise, and Mourvedre, Grenache, and Syrah. So basically, what I did with this wine was I made a white wine out of the Cinsault, the Counoise, and Mourvedre, and made a very dark rosé through a process called Saunier out of the Syrah and the Grenache, and blended those back in to get the color that I wanted. And I was really happy with the color. It's kind of like a nice orangey, salmon pink kind of frost, kind of classy and fun at the same time. So I was really happy with the color. I hadn't had a lot of experience making rosé. I made one Grenache rosé in the past, and it was pretty sad. So I was really happy with coming out with the quality of this wine.
Cool. And this is your first wine that you've made for Derby front to back, basically.
Yeah, this is the first wine that has been released commercially. So.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right on.
Yeah.
Very cool. Oh, it's really good. I know earlier, Matt, you were commenting on it. Also, it's a pretty delicious wine.
Very nice and fresh and crisp, and lots of good acid on it. So definitely a good representation of what Paso can do, and this region for rosés in general. Turns out really nice.
So I'm curious about, say, the Mourvedre that's in this, and it comes from, because Mourvedre is a late ripening variety. I'd love to know kind of what went into where this was planted and the decision for that being done. I'm guessing, Steve, maybe you had something to do with that?
Well, we've got multiple, as at Derby, essentially. So John kind of gets to cherry pick, the lots between all the ranches that we want for our program. So which Movedra is this? Do you?
It's the
6A?
6A, the one in front.
6A. So this is a kind of an interesting little block. It's probably in the coldest spot of the ranch.
Oh,
And so we planted it there, and knowing that, but it's a tough. It gets hit potentially with frost 2 times. It gets it in the spring, and it also gets it in the fall. So we knew by planting Movedra there, it would definitely miss the chance of frost in the spring, but then it would be a very short season, and who knows when that usually ends. And we get the fall frost sometime in mid-November. We knew that it would be game over by then, so we knew it could be a good spot. We didn't know what else to put there, but we knew it would make a good rosé style Movedra. It wasn't going to get overly ripe, and it was going to have good acidity, and it was going to at least escape half the frost in that spot. Otherwise, it's a pretty marginal spot.
very cool.
So that's kind of just an example of knowing what you have and then not trying to do something else with it, but knowing what can do well there. And so you're not going to plant something else that may never ripen there. If you know it's going to rosé, it kind of opens up a lot of options, and you can make it really nice with a spot that may make other wines, not quite as good or as ripe, and so or more marginal. Where this one turns out perfect. So, yeah.
Quick question that we had come through that I thought I'd throw out to all of you guys. I've heard of vines being dry farmed, which we have quite a few dry farm vineyards in Paso. And they're dry farmed, from the time that they're planted. Yes, definitely. That's how that goes down. I'd like to follow up with that question that can you go and become a dry farm vineyard even though you started off as an irrigated vineyard, for one?
Yeah, I've done that, no problem, at a ranch in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We just turn the water off. But being able to dry farm can be very risky business. That's where you really have to search and put the soil first, because you're going to want very well drained soil at a certain extent, in the sense that the roots can really get through it. But then you're going to want a water holding layer farther down. So you have these deep roots and a layer of usually a rocky clay is usually ideal, because the rocks allow the roots to go through the clay, but the clay will really hold on to the water. So when you get into the hotter part of the growing season, even though everything looks dry and all the grass is dead, you have a deep root system that's down 4, 5, 10 feet. They're still be able to get enough water to ripen. But if you have a really, really shallow rooting system, there's just no way you can dry farm. So some of these hillsides, especially in a really water sensitive place like Paso, it can be really hard. It's all about the soil.
Do you also know about the difference in rainfall between some of your ranches there?
Yes.
I imagine it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, very dramatic. East Paso, where Laura's is, you're at 12, 14 inches. Moving to Templeton, you're at 20, 24. And over on the coast, it's 30. We butt right up to, I can't think of the mountain behind us right now. Rocky Butte. Rocky Butte is directly behind us, which is getting 60 to 100 inches of rainfall. But yeah, I look at, as far as dry farming, that's always my goal, is to design a vineyard, if possible, even though you may start it with irrigation, but one day it essentially becomes self-sufficient if the conditions are right. And I look at it always almost as a math equation. And it's simply put is, how big is the pot that you're growing the plant in, and how much water does it hold? And then how much water do you receive through rainfall for that pot? Because you could have a very deep pot that holds a whole bunch of water, but if you don't receive any water through rainfall, it doesn't matter. Whereas
you gotta have that.
you may have
Gotta have the rainfall.
very small that doesn't hold any water, and you get a whole bunch of rainfall, it might be okay. So the dry farming thing is they can be dry farmed in a lot of places, but it also, the thing with dry farming is, will it meet your goals for your farming and your wine? Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's gonna meet your goals.
Yeah. And I think it's important for the audience to note that it's not like we want to apply water anyway to these grapes. We don't want, they're not table grapes. They need to not be ballooned out and fattened with water. They need probably the exact opposite. And so it's essentially just enough that
they need that stress. Yeah, for sure. But but at the same time, yeah, you don't. I had a vineyard on the west side. What was it, Star Ranch, and we used the irrigation to help get it set up. But I noticed after a few years, with 35 plus inches of rain, that I didn't irrigate at all in some blocks, and some blocks just maybe the end of August they needed a little bit to get over the hump. But it was. And it was just vastly different because the other parts of the El Pomar area, we just didn't get that much rain. We got maybe 12 to 15 inches. So in the spring, the more rain we get in the spring and the more water is in the soil, the longer we're going to go without irrigating. And then once we get those hot days and the soil profile starts to dry out, then that's when we got to start up and start irrigating with our drip emitter systems.
Awesome. Thank you. I thought I'd keep going with the wines and move on to this Pinot. So I'll tell everybody, audience on watching here, that vineyard is clearly not in Paso, nor is this wine Paso either, but it's right next door. It's what they've been talking about as far as being this particular vineyard being a mile away from the ocean. This is called the Derbyshire Vineyard. And in particular, I think it's just, I've been to this property. It's absolutely amazing. We actually did a little outing to this vineyard for our annual Blend Fest event that we do over on the coast, over in San Simeon and Cambria, where we actually had some guests who purchased tickets to go out there and meet Sean and Steve and learn a little bit about this particular property. I dig this property. I get to San Simeon a lot, and so I thought, let's include it and let's have Steve talk a little bit about this, because I have a very specific question. You don't see a lot of vineyards right next to the ocean, and this one is, and it's awesome. Why don't we see a lot of vineyards near ocean, and how did you manage to do it with this one?
This one was definitely the vision and the dream of Ray Derby. I mean, he had this property, and you typically don't see them this close to the ocean for multiple reasons. When you start getting, depending, again, everything is site specific and where you are in the world, but generally on the central coast, the closer you are to the ocean, it just gets, as we know, cooler and cooler. And you can reach a point where it's almost too cool. I don't think this site is almost too cool, but it is so close to the ocean that we get some challenges of extreme rainfall, extreme wind. It doesn't fully go dormant during the year. That's another thing. These grapevines do need a hard frost, generally speaking, for them to go dormant. And so the closer you get to the ocean, it's just a lot more challenges. However, you know, we've been able to do it, and the vision of Ray, we're going for it out there, and get some pretty unique terroir, very hardcore terroir-driven wines coming out of that ranch.
Yeah, and that's this Pinot. Talk about the Pinot that we have. And are we looking at Pinot vines here as well?
Yeah, so we're looking at the vines here. We're just above the San Simeon Creek campground, kind of on an old marine terrace, and this is the Pinot. We've got multiple clones of Pinot, but one of the big issues we've had is setting a decent crop out there because of the hardcore winds in the spring. So we've done some things, lowering the vines. We're doing whatever we can to mitigate that wind, and we've had some pretty decent results. You know, putting the vines lower to the ground, growing a cover crop, the mohawk, what we call it.
I have it.
Yeah, you know, this is what we call the mohawk. So we plant the cover crop. The vine's fruiting wire is 18 inches off the ground. It's all cane pruned, which is another thing you have to do in a cool climate because of fruitfulness, and we grow a cover crop every row right down the middle. That gets to be about 3 feet tall, so the vines are kind of down below that. And then next to it, we disc to create warmth from the sun. So we're scrapping for every heat unit we can and to try to block the wind. It's a challenging place to grow grapes, but it's very unique, that's for sure.
I'm pretty sure, by the way, in this picture, you weren't taking a picture of the vineyard. You were taking a picture of that wave in the background.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
I would have too. Let's talk a little bit about the process from the time that, let's just say you dig that soil pit to the point where you're actually harvesting grapes off of a vine that will actually go into a wine. What time span are we at?
By the time you get to try it, I think minimum probably 4 or 5 years.
Well,
Or more.
3 to 4 years to get your first crop, and
Yeah.
then a year or two, depending on what kind of wine you're making, red or white, barrel aged, tank aged.
Sure.
The minimum I would think would be you're looking at 4 years from when you break ground until when you have something in tank. Before that reaches the consumer, it can be as many as 7 years. So, and in the entire process, you're putting money and time and work into the vineyard. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you do want to plant a vineyard.
Yeah, I don't think until you really get the full vineyard developed, the vine infrastructure is complete, it's filled out, and then a couple of years on it, do you really start to see the true nature of what that, of the fruits of your labor, essentially. So yeah, 8 years and change really until you really start to see what you've done. If you're a hero or a bum,
That's 3 years just for third leaf, as they say, but 3 years from planting. So the time before you even plant and analyzing, the soils and all of that, there's a little bit of time spent doing that as well before you're actually sticking a vine in the ground. And so that's challenging, and that will take quite a bit of time. Oh, sorry. I put that one in there by accident. Although
That's from your personal collection there.
I was that's from you. That was a good day.
See you hard at work there on the
Yeah.
I want to go on to the GSM if I could, from Pomar Junction. And so Matt, if you want to talk a little bit about not only the wine, but also where it's grown and some of the qualities of Pomar.
Yeah, this is grown in the El Pomar district, part of Paso Robles. These Rhone varietals do really well, especially on the calcareous based soils. Like I mentioned before, Talbot's Creek, that whole, Balcastel, Chateauneuf-du-Pape area. I find that the El Pomar area is a lot like the Gigondas area to me. The flavor profile, when I was in France tasting, drinking some of their Syrahs and GSMs and Grenaches, to me when I was there, it tasted a lot like I was back in Paso tasting our wines there. And so, yeah, this GSM's done really well for us. We've, in the past gotten some good scores from Robert Parker with a 93 and 94. And it's just kind of every year it's a little bit different. This is the new 15, which we haven't released yet, but it's a Syrah, 44% Mourvedre, 34%, and Grenache, 22%. So it's actually an SMG, but kind of known in the restaurant industry and tasting as a GSM, Grenache Syrah Mourvedre. So it's been a kind of a classic wine that really shows off what Paso can do.
Yeah.
Very deep, very tarry, very kind of spicy and rich, but still well balanced and not overly ripe or overly alcoholic. And I think it brings up a good point when we were talking about what grapes do you want to plant. And GSM is a classic example of one grape might not be the best option, where you're going to want to have these plenty of varieties. So saying if I only want Cab, that you know if you love Cab, you know you might want Merrill and Petit Verdot and Malbec as well. And the same, you know, a lot of these vineyards really all the wines are really need the multiple varieties to make a balanced wine. Everything's bringing a piece to the puzzle.
They all kind of add, exactly what you're saying. They all kind of add to each other, and it's like a meal upon itself. You know, you have a meal with a bunch of different parts of it that make it a really nice meal, but this wine is kind of like a meal in itself, or has a lot of different aspects brought together with it. And I think what's kind of interesting when I was touring through France is that the difference between Paso Robles and France is you have to go from one region to another, take a train, go a long ways to experience these tasting rooms. And they have all Rhone, or they have all Bordeaux, or they have all Burgundy. But like if Paso Robles, you go to Derby or Pomar Junction or pretty much any winery, and you may get a Pinot Noir, and you may get a GSM, and you may get a really good Merlot or Cab, and there's just a lot of diversity there. So it's pretty interesting how Paso you can come here to the tasting rooms and get like basically everything you can find anywhere else. It's all in one spot. So I find that kind of interesting.
I wanted to go ahead and share our ABA real quick to also be able to tell you all where these wines are basically from and where some of these vineyards are. And so right now the El Pomar district here is what we're tasting from. And basically right about where this eye is about where Matt's vineyard is at. So they're the Pomar Junction.
So Pomar's right there. It's kind of right in the middle of the district. We like to say it's the sweet spot, but on a warmer year, it gets a little bit warmer, but on a cooler year, we got enough warmth to ripen up the grapes. And so it's a pretty interesting area to grow, and it's pretty nice with the demand in that area for grapes too, because we sell 95+% of our grapes to other wineries in the area. So we just keep a real small amount for ourselves, but it's nice to have some recognition of the area and some demand for the grapes, even in sometimes tougher economies.
Yeah. The Laura's Vineyard is just about right where the Paso Robles Estrella district and the Geneseo districts meet, right there along 46, practically right where 46, that little label is, I believe. And then the Derby Vineyard over in the Willow Creek district, I believe, correct?
No, we're actually on the far northwest corner. We're in the Templeton Gap, but our boundary to the north and to the west is actually the boundary itself.
Okay.
Keep going up, and that's basically the Derby Vineyard right there. Yep.
Right there. Okay. Excellent. How cool. And you know what? We did a press trip to that vineyard a while back ago, and I remember how windy it was up there at the top. So that's right. Yeah, Templeton Gap right there at that time in the day when the gap turns on. So then go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that we've been real fortunate, especially myself spending my whole career in Paso, is you can see just in Paso Robles, this excluding the other areas within SLO County, but just how diverse it is. We've got this many essentially districts and AVAs within the Paso AVA, and we haven't been restrained by specific varieties. There's a lot of varieties that do very, very well. And so that's when talking what are the goals of the owner and what do they want to produce, because we've got a lot of options of producing some pretty excellent whites, and especially reds, Italian, Spanish, Bordeaux, Rhone varieties, Zinfandel. I mean, we can grow a lot of different varieties in the right places in Paso.
Yeah.
So
we say that we have basically about 64 different varieties grown in Paso, with about 41,000 vineyard acres or planted acres. So it's 41,000, but our entire area though is about 612,000 acres. So it's fairly large at 42 miles from east to west and about 25 or 30 miles actually at its deepest point north to south. So it's a pretty big region that has 11 districts in it. And actually, I'm going to be doing a show in the future where I'll be basically doing the masterclass that I typically share to trade and media. I'm going to be doing that, and a special caveat is going to be I'm going to try to include some of our audience members that are often on with us and do some little guest spots and talk about the wines that they're enjoying at home. So just a little shout out on something coming up here pretty soon. There's a question about how fires are affecting us right now. I'm going to start by saying that the Big Sur fire called the Dolan fire right now, it's right about at our county line-ish, so not too far, about maybe 40 miles-ish or so from where I'm sitting right now, over there towards the coast. Our skies are orange, and we haven't seen blue sky since Saturday, I think. So it's you know, you can kind of smell it, but it's mostly super eerie and weird outside. I don't know how it's affecting you guys and where you are over at Derbyshire or at Pomar, but if you guys want to address that.
You want to talk about that, Matt, first?
Yeah, well, we're really lucky at the moment because it's very high up, at least over at Pomar and most of Paso area. So, so it's providing some shade. It's cooled it down a little bit. It looks like with the weather's kind of changed a little bit anyways. I was up actually at Shaver Lake this last weekend camping, and I didn't have to take a helicopter out, but I was watching things once I got back. I was trying to unplug and then, you know, not pay attention to the internet and all that. And then meanwhile, my 8-year-old daughter goes, "Look at that over there." And it was like this huge plume of smoke that didn't seem like it was all that far away. So we got back to the campground and figured out we needed to probably leave the next day because it wasn't really that close to us, but we had to go through Shaver to get out. And it was a good thing we did because it was later closed, like about 5 hours later, you couldn't get through with the trailer. But as far as the grapes, we're lucky. The smoke hasn't hung around too low. A couple weeks ago, it's probably worse than it is right now. And the closer you are, it seems like there are test analysis. I know the analysis companies are just overrun with samples from California right now. People trying to figure out whether they need to pick it, or if they do pick it, what are the wines going to be like? And so we're lucky in Paso in general. We kind of dodged a bullet. It was real close, but our tests have been coming back that things are very negligible. So there shouldn't be much effect from it, because I've tried samples from Russian River Valley, real close to a fire that was there for weeks, and it just tasted like you were sitting at a campfire and you smelled your clothes with the smokiness, and it was just kind of overwhelming. So it's kind of scary, and it seems like every year it seems to be getting a little worse and kind of the new normal.
Yeah, we're just kind of waiting on a lot of results to come in. Frankly, from what I'm hearing, more positive than I thought it was going to be. It was really smoky here for quite a while, and potentially there's small windows when that smoke can really have an adverse effect on the food and the wine. But so far, fingers crossed, things are sounding positive right now for Paso.
Cool. All right, right on. Thank you for that question there, Diane. I appreciate that. It's probably important for us to address, and then also just keep an eye out, because fire season isn't done yet here in California, unfortunately. And so
yeah, other areas may not be as lucky as us, I think. There's definitely other wine regions that are going to have some real issues to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. The images that I saw from friends up in San Francisco, and even some of the stuff that made the press up there, those skies up north are looking pretty bad. And so we definitely have our thoughts of our friends at the North Coast, definitely close to heart right now. So tough times, but we're coming up on our end. And so I thank you guys, Sean, Steve, and Matt, so much for hanging out with me today and being a part of the Zoom Hangout, the Paso Wine Zoom Hangout. What do you have happening next? We've got just a couple minutes left. Are you doing any virtual tastings? Harvest, obviously, we started talking about it earlier, that it has started for all of you. But are you doing anything coming up soon that other people should know about?
Steve and I are doing some tastings outdoors at Laura's Vineyard, some socially distanced tasting. And I believe the taster is doing virtual tastings if, by appointment only. And we have an outdoor patio which is open for tasting.
Where do they go to find out about that? What's the website?
It'll be derbywineestates.com.
Great. Very cool. Matt, what's happening with you guys?
It's similar. I mean, even before COVID, we moved to by appointment tasting. So on our website, we have a spot where you can email us or set up an appointment for tasting. And then we're looking at maybe doing our first wine club, something maybe outdoor socially distanced dinner or something. We're just trying to figure something out where we're not reckless, but we know people want to do something and we got to figure out a way to do it. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Right on. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you everyone for tuning in this week. I really appreciate it, hanging out with us again. Next week, we're doing, I'm calling it the show, the Road Warrior Show. We are sitting down with 3 guys who get out into the market and get wines on shelves, get on wine lists, and we're going to talk to them about what that takes to get the wine out there, because you can make wine, but you got to sell it too, right? And so it takes a lot of effort, sometimes even more so than just making the stuff, right? So yeah. Thank you again, everybody. Appreciate you being a part of the Hangout. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
All right, later. See you guys later. Steve, I'll see you in the water.
Yeah.
He knows good.